Most people don't realize how important Theodore Roosevelt was to our country. One of the very first things people think about when they hear about Theodore Roosevelt is that the teddy bear was named after him. But most people just think it was because he spared the life of a bear cub. And the Bare Necessities article by Williams Quarterly states the truth. It informs us that the name came from when Roosevelt and his men were on a hunt. His dogs came across a very large adult bear. The dog set up the bear, and his men tied it to a tree. Roosevelt insisted they kill the bear with a knife and put it out of its misery, and then they eat the meat for the next 2 days of their hunt. Then the Washington Post magazine insisted to have it drawn into a cartoon, and when it was being drawn, the large adult bear was drawn into a small bear cub, and that's where the confusion began. This inspired manufacturers to make the teddy bear. Theodore Roosevelt was a very interesting man whom I enjoy reading about. Today I'm going to tell you some about his early life, his time in the Dakotas, and also some about his political life. I hope that by the end of this speech you know more about Theodore Roosevelt than the fact that the teddy bear was named after him and that he was a president of the United States. Most people don't know much about the early life of Theodore Roosevelt. Coming from the book The Strenuous Life by Andrea Dorfman is a lot of information about this time in his life. He lived a normal childhood, was homeschooled, and attended Harvard Law School. He got married at age 22 to Alice Lee. He became a part of the New York State Assembly, being the youngest man ever a part of it. He dropped out of law school also. He served 3 one-year terms and published his first book about the War of 1812 during this time. Then, a huge tragedy occurred that would change his life forever. His wife and mother both passed away within hours of each other. 2 days prior, him and his wife had just had their first daughter. Theodore Roosevelt didn't know how he was going to get over this tragedy. So, he decided to leave his daughter in care of his sister and head to the Dakotas to find himself and mourn. Little did Roosevelt realize, the Dakotas would help shape the rest of his life. The article, The Cowboy Years, goes into great detail about this time in his life. He had entered the Dakotas before the tragedy and went into partnership with 2 rangers. Then, he had the huge desire, he loved the States. The environment, the atmosphere, the scenery, and the residents all stole his heart. He had a huge desire to hunt there as well. When he re-entered the Dakotas after the tragedy, he went to work at his ranch, got his own horse, and decided to live the real experience of a cowboy. He also made hunting a big part of this time in his life. He had the true desire to hunt true game, and to Roosevelt, true game meant an animal that could fight back. According to the book Theodore Roosevelt National Park by John Hamilton, Theodore Roosevelt also established the U.S. National Forest Service, 5 national parks, and 18 national monuments because of his time in the Dakotas. His time there was a failure financially, but it eventually got him back to where he needed to be in his political life and just in his life, period. The Theodore Roosevelt National Park was established pretty much in his honor. If you go there, it's like entering a time capsule, taking you back to where he really lived the cowboy life, seeing the same things he'd seen. Now, it was back to his political life and a new beginning there. This information also coming from the book The Strenuous Life by Andrea Dorfman. It didn't start off very well when he lost the race for mayor of New York City. He became very involved in politics and became Secretary of the Navy. Then he got remarried and had 5 children. He then became governor of New York and signed many bills. Then it was his big break. He became vice president for McKinley in 1900. But 6 months after McKinley's presidency, he was shot and killed. So that meant Roosevelt was up next for president. The article Teddy Bill Roosevelt's Ride to Recovery tells us better information about his actual presidency. He did a lot for the Navy, he built it, and also created a group of men known as the Rough Riders, which did a lot in our history. He was a very successful president, and he did so much for our country. He served two terms and left office in 1909. He lost the race for his third term, so he decided he'd do something else with his life. He was a very successful president and a very successful person. His environmental efforts were very important to our country. The early life was just beginning. The Dakotas really shaped his life, and the political life was his big start. Theodore Roosevelt did so much, not only for himself, but also for his country. I hope there are more men to come in our political system like Theodore Roosevelt.